Hello and welcome. You're watching the Mining Show brought to you by Blytheway on Core Finance, and I'm Charlie Gibson. Now, the Bushveld complex in South Africa is famous worldwide. It's famous for a number of things, but one of the things it tends not to be famous for is hosting companies whose share price has gone up, well, in round numbers, about 6 times in the space of 6 months. But one such company does exist, and it's our very own Bushveld Minerals, whose share price has gone up from about 1.50 earlier on this year to about 9p now. And joining me is the Chief Executive, Fortune Mojapelo. Fortune, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on the Mining Show. Now, not only has your share price gone up roughly 6 times in the space of 6 months, but you've also announced a transaction today, haven't you? So tell us about the transaction.
Yeah, we announced a transformational transaction. Earlier in the year, in April, we completed the acquisition of Vametco, which is a significant low-cost vanadium producer out on the eastern limb of the Bushveld complex. That transaction, we did it together with Yellow Dragon Holdings, owning 55% shares and with us 45% of the vehicle that did the acquisition. The transaction we did today is essentially a buyout of Yellow Dragon's stake, which allows us to consolidate Vametco properly into Bushveld Minerals.
So it raises the question slightly. If you did the deal in, March, April this year, and now you're finishing up in this, why did you not just buy, why did you have Yellow Dragon in the first place?
Look, at the time that we did the transaction, the first time around, if we had gone ahead and acquired it on our own as a company, that transaction would have been a reverse takeover. At the time, we were not in a position to go through a lengthy and fairly expensive reverse takeover process. So we went into a partnership out of necessity, and we're fortunate to have found a partner of the nature of Yellow Dragon Holdings, who share our excitement and our view around where the vanadium market is going and the potential that is Bushveld Minerals. So now we've been able to do that. We have released the admission document. The transaction is a reverse takeover, so we're going to have a shareholders meeting on the 20th of December, and we expect to complete the transaction then.
So you had 45%, you're buying 55% of this particular vehicle, and how much are you paying for it?
So we're acquiring it for an initial $11 million, which is comprising $4.5 million in cash and about $6.6 million in shares, Bushveld Mineral shares. And in doing that, we're going to issue a total of about 6.3% on an enlarged share capital base. So our shareholders experience a very minimal dilution in this transaction. I'm pleased that we could pay most of it through Bushveld shares. And beyond the $11.1 million I've just mentioned, there is an additional payment over the next 2 years of $600,000 each. And finally, at the end of the 2020 financial year, depending and based on the earnings of Vametco in that year, there will be an additional payment that's payable to Yellow Dragon.
Okay, so you're paying, we know you're paying 12.2 and then plus a balance depending on the fortunes of Vametco. Now, is that directly comparable to the 17 odd million that you paid for your 45% stake earlier on this year?
But when you consider that we acquired the company Vametco, our stake in Strategic Minerals Corporation, which is the holding company for Vametco, for $16.5 million, and we are now acquiring a 55% interest for an initial $11 million. At face value, you might say, you know, we're paying a lot of money, but consider...
It sounds like a very good deal to me.
But it's a fantastic deal if you consider that when we agreed to this deal, the vanadium prices were in the order of $13 per kgV. Today we're talking vanadium prices of about $40 per kilogram vanadium. And we have since paid off the external debt. About 80% of the financing for this transaction was debt, as you will recall, which has since been paid off very quickly in under 5 months. So, you know, I think that's testament to just the quality of the asset, its cash generation capacity. And quite frankly, our view was the longer you took to do a transaction like this, the more expensive it might have been. This couldn't have been a better time to do the deal.
So what can you tell us about the Yellow Dragon who are selling you the extra 55%? Because it sounds like they've given you a fantastic deal there. Was that always their intention? Or are you very close to them and, you know, was that something you agreed back in March, or how's it developed?
Look, the deal is a win-win. If you consider that, as I said, $16.5, $14 million of that acquisition price was debt. That debt has since been, the external debt has since been repaid.
So your return on equity.
So our equity contribution in terms of this acquisition was about $2.5 million. Yes, Yellow Dragon was a part of that, which is, you know, fantastic. And of course, I'm talking these numbers without referring to the transaction costs themselves, which are not insignificant. So if you look at what we're paying, it's a great return for Yellow Dragon. But as you said earlier on, our shareholders have experienced a near six-fold increase in the value of their shares in the same period. So both parties in this transaction come off very, very well. And you know, those are the kind of deals you want to do where both parties are happy in the end. Yellow Dragon has been a supportive partner, and they are known to the company. They believe, as I said, in the future of vanadium. As a consequence of this entire transaction, if you consider the shareholding they had in the company initially, they are just under 10% shareholder of Bushveld Minerals. So they continue to be a significant, you know, partner, a party to the Bushveld story going forward.
Anything with the name Dragon in the name usually implies to people that it has a Chinese part of it, or indeed that it hails from China. Is this the case in the case of Yellow Dragon or not?
Well, not, but
that's
you know,
just a coincidence.
Yellow Dragon Holdings is a name that the principals of Yellow Dragon Holdings gave to their company, right? So, you know, why they did
But it's
that.
not a Chinese company. It's not, the money's not coming out of Hong Kong or wherever.
No, it's not.
It's the South African. Sorry, is it a South African company and does it have South African backers? We know it has mining.
Suffers to say it's an African investor.
Right, okay. And that's probably as much as you can say on that particular topic. You also, I mean, to put this into some sort of context, you put out your results, your half-year results for Bushveld.
That's right.
Relatively recently. And Vametco was, because your interest in Vametco at that point was what, around about...
So an effective 26.6%. That's why you've heard us talk.
So there's just the one line there, wasn't there, which was earnings from associates.
Well, we haven't actually been consolidating Vametco's numbers into our numbers yet, precisely because of that point that, you know, we only have an effective 26.6%.
But that's going to double in a bit now.
As a consequence of this transaction, we are 59% effective interest in Vametco, so we can consolidate the numbers, which is significant, right? Because that means we start to report revenues, we start to report earnings, and we can truly say today that Bushveld Minerals is a producing company, and not only a producer, but it's a significant player in the vanadium global market.
Okay, so the next set of accounts, which will be what, the full year to the end of February 2018, should look quite different.
The next set of accounts will be very different because we will be consolidating Vametco into those accounts. Indeed.
And what do we know about Vametco's dividend policy? I mean, the option must be there.
To the extent that we control the company now, the dividend policy is for us to shape. So let me start with that. But secondly, let me also state that I think we have indicated that we have fairly ambitious plans in terms of growing our position in the vanadium market. We have started an expansion program at Vametco to increase the production volumes from about 3,000 MTV, representing about 3.5% of the market, to 5,000 MTV by 2019. And beyond that, we want to grow the company. We want to introduce more product lines. We are on record for talking about work we're doing in the area of electrolyte manufacturing in support of the energy storage applications of vanadium. So I'd like to just also emphasize we're still very much a growth story, and you know, that will inform whatever dividend policy that we come up with as a company, and in due course we will obviously provide details of that.
Okay. Any idea on the timing as to when you might provide details?
I can't tell you right now yet, but again, now that we have a producing company, we will be providing some guidance in terms of what we expect future performance to look like, revenue, earnings, etc.
I always say this, we always come here and we always have 10 minutes on, and you've got so many other assets because you've got the tin assets, and I know some of them have been spun off, and you've got the coal assets. Do we need to talk about any of those? I know this is mostly about Vametco.
Well, there is things to talk about in respect of tin. You know, we've just listed AfriTin a few weeks ago, which is now a standing tin pure play company that gives investors exposure to tin on African continent, and is well positioned. It raised £3.5 million and is going to be an interesting story going forward with near-term production profile and as a consolidation platform for tin assets in Africa. We also got a power purchase agreement, agreed with the Madagascar government for an initial 10 megawatts on Lima, which is an important catalyst for the power project, the 60 megawatt power project that we're developing at the Imaloto coal project. But I think today is about Vametco and this transaction, so let's not take focus.
All right, we'll come back to those another time. Excellent.
Yes.
Fortune, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Fortune Mojapelo, the Chief Executive of Bushveld Minerals. I'm afraid that's all we got time for this morning, but join us again shortly and we'll be back with more companies, more ideas, more thoughts, more opportunities. But when you look at it and you think share price up 6 times in 6 months, pretty difficult to do better than that. Until then, you have a very capital day.